What's up, everybody? I just want to quick make another video. I had made a video earlier today that went absolutely perfect, and I was trying to upload it and everything went wrong and I erased it. So here I am back in my garage in my car, about to try to hit on a lot of the same points that I hit on in the first video. Like to hear it go. But first of all, I was really moved, I think, by the response I got from the first video. I was gonna say surprised, but I'm not surprised, because there's a lot of people out here, the Lloyd Evanses of the world, the Fifths, and so many others, XJWs, that make these kinds of videos and put out their personal opinions and research the Watchtower Bible Tracking Society, and they all, this is a very unique experience being a Jehovah's Witness. It's an even more unique experience being an ex-Jehovah's Witness, and we all we got, when it comes to kind of like the residual effects of putting this organization behind you, because if you haven't been in it, it's hard to explain it to somebody. You know what I mean? That a church could have this much influence and this much effect, on a person's daily life, even 10, 15 years down the line. And that's something that I've realized since I've left. I've only been out for less than a year, but some of the people that I've spoken to have been out for decades, and are still trying to put the pieces of their lives back together. And that's why it's important for whoever has the capability to be able to tell their story, to be able to encourage people when they can, because there's only so many of us that go through this all together, and there is definitely only so many of us that have it within us to be able to speak out and to be able to possibly encourage and help those that are maybe not as strong, or have that kind of personality, because it isolates you, and me, I've been fortunate, in my situation and the way things happen for me, because I don't have a ton of family that it's not like generation after generation after generation. I just came in with, my mom, and my mom left, and it was just me and my wife. My wife doesn't have a ton of family, and when I left, at first it was just me, but it was only a matter of months before my wife came around and was able to see it too. So I'm fortunate in that case, but even with that, my situation is pretty much close to as ideal as leaving the organization gets, and I still have experienced the residual effects of leaving every day, and that's what I kind of wanted to hit on in this video, because just like I said, some of the responses that from the internet, and also talking to people that also have left, that I know personally, and seeing them face to face, that's one of the things that I don't know if it's that we don't see it coming. You think like, okay, I left the organization, like I'm good, I'm free, but there's another wave of like tribulation that hits you soon after you leave, and very few people, I think, see it coming, because once you get all of that out of your mind and off your face and off your eyes, and you can hear differently and you see the world differently, and it's like, wow, like that's great, I'm free, but now I have to figure out, it's like learning how to walk again. You know what I mean? Like, you did it before, but you know, something happened, and now you have to learn to do it again. And that's kind of, it's almost like an identity crisis, because you know, something that I didn't mention, you know, I mentioned in my last video that I think I mentioned that I was a witness for 13 years. I was baptized for 13 years, but I was, you know, around the organization since I was a child, you know, on and off. But even with that, you know, there's not one decision that I've made, especially major decisions in my life, you know, that has not been influenced some way, somehow, by my association with the Jehovah's Witness organization, you know. And that part I don't think I realized until, you know, I left, you know. And me personally, you know, I've always been somebody that's been accused of having a strong personality, so you know, I might deal with things a little bit differently, but you know, the reason that I think my anger that I have toward the organization and toward the things that I've experienced is not necessarily mine, and it never really has been. It's more so been for the people that won't speak up for themselves, that can't speak up for themselves, you know what I mean? Or they don't know, they don't have the same, you know, mental facilities to be able to process information and break it down and make sense of it and be confident in those decisions, because their confidence and their identity was stolen from them pretty much since before it even fully developed. A lot of people, if you were a born-in witness. And so those are the people that I get angry from. And then you have generations and generations and generations of family and friends that are tied into that organization. And, you know, that's just a completely different monster. So that's really my motivation behind speaking out, you know. Even my situation that I spoke about in my last video about somebody that was close to me dying. He was like a father, but he wasn't my actual father. You got people out here that are really losing fathers and mothers and sisters in death and never having an opportunity to be able to talk to them. You know, that's traumatic. That is so traumatic, and it's so sad, and it's so unnecessary, and it's so terrible. You know, for an organization to do that to people that, you know, for me, like I said, I'm good, you know. But when it comes to people challenging my story and my position on the Watchtower and anybody's story who's representative or close to mine, I want all the smoke. Like, I'm coming for it, you know. And so in this video, like I said, I just wanted to talk about the residual effects. Something I also didn't mention in the first video that I'm gonna end off, I'm gonna start off with this video, is that this time around was not my first time leaving the organization. I tried to leave when I was 24, about 7-8 years ago. And you know, I got the whole, you know, my friends around me and stuff like that from the meetings and from the hall, talk you out of it and everything like that. I did end up leaving for about a year, you know, and it was a similar situation. You know, it was similar feelings that started me to kind of doubt things. It's just that, you know, I felt like a shell of myself, you know. On top of that, you know, I felt like I was just struggling so much, you know, and I was in a suburb at the time. You know, Milwaukee is one of the most segregated cities in the United States. So the congregation I went to was like, at the time, I was living out in the suburbs. We had a connection for an apartment out there. So it was mostly a white congregation, and it was in the suburbs. So everybody out there had money and was cool and whatever. And it just was a terrible place to be for the place that I was in my life, period. You know what I mean? Because I didn't have nobody there could really understand my struggle as a young black man that didn't have a college education, that was trying to support a wife and a child. And I think I had a child on the way at the time. And there was all these, like I said, influences from being a Jehovah's Witness, that you were trying to kind of filter I was trying to kind of filter my financial options for providing for my family through the requirements of being a Jehovah's Witness, and that eliminated a lot of stuff in my mind. And I was just tired of it, I was tired. But at 24 and not having lived as much and seen as much, and been through as much as I have compared to today, I don't think I had as much confidence in kind of explaining my position, so I left. Things kind of got worse a little bit when I was gone. I never really did any research or anything like that. I just was gone, and then I ended up coming back. I tried to go to school and that didn't work out, and all kinds of things. But that it still had a mental hold on me, even when I was out there. My wife would even ask me, and this was actually one of the big reasons why I came back, like, what are you going to tell your kids? What are you going to tell the boys about God? How are you going to explain God to them? And at the time, I didn't have an answer for that I felt like was acceptable, and so that used to kind of pull at me. It doesn't anymore. I tell them that God is in you, God is everywhere. Read a book. Whatever you do not go to the Kingdom Hall. That's my explanation right now and from now on. But at the time, that was one of the things that, like, yeah, maybe I should go back to Jehovah, blah blah blah. And so we did, after a year or so. And actually, before I really started waking up, I was feeling different, but I didn't feel like I hadn't thought about really leaving the hall. But I was just like, I'm fast forwarding now to 10 months ago, 11 months ago, maybe a little over a year before I started waking up. I just started to have these feelings of like I mentioned in the last video, like I just felt like a coward. Like I felt like a shell of myself again. You know what I mean? I just felt like I wasn't getting anything of substance from the relationships that I had inside that organization. And I'm just like, man, I just want to live my life, and I'm gonna live my life. I'm still gonna serve Jehovah and this and that, so around that time, when I was in that mind state, I had just gotten back on Facebook after being off for like 7-8 years, and I had gotten a post from 7-8 years ago, because Facebook will give you like anniversary, like it's like 7 years ago you posted this, or 3 years ago, or 1 year ago you posted that. So this came up, and it was from 7 years ago, and it was me talking about spirituality versus religion, and it kind of struck me because I thought to myself, like, man, I'm right back in the same place. Like, that's how I was feeling at the time, and that number 7, they probably changed, they got away from this, but back in the day, I used to love when you looked in the insight book and in certain books, they would talk about, the significance of certain numbers. The number 10 was completion, the number 3 was like, intensity, and the number 7 was like divine completion. It was like completeness through God, and they would have different examples, and I remembered that about the 7 years, and I'm like, man, I've basically like completed like a spiritual cycle out here, and I'm right back at the same point, and so that kind of planted a little seed, and then things started to kind of progress from there, as far as me waking up. But just to fast forward, I think I would say I was probably officially done in April of 2019, but I was only done mentally, officially in April of 2019. The only reason I say that is because my wife, her process was different than mine, because to her, I think this all kind of came out of nowhere. You know what I mean? But so I remember us kind of having, back and forth and conversations about things. And I think I had started growing my beard around March, and still, I was still thinking like, well, I'm going to try this. I'm going to test out these inspired utterances, right? Because, I was talking to people about the beard thing. It was really bothering me because at the time I had a couple Bible studies, both young black men, and it was bothering me that I was now going to have to pass this on to them as a rule when I didn't believe it or really have any scriptural evidence about why I shouldn't have one myself. So I asked around, decided to grow one in March, but I'm still thinking like, I'm going to serve Jehovah, but, it's going to be from my heart type of thing. But after a few meetings, that was dead. I'm like, you know what? Everybody here is crazy, and I got to get out of here. Like, I was done. I didn't want to hear, I didn't care what anybody else said or whatever, And so, my wife at first, was like I said, it was very heated, between us. It was very heated, and the exchanges that we would have after the meetings, I would be going to the meetings like, playing around and kind of like making fun of people, or just be in my chair like, oh my God, or like go to the car or whatever. But I would hit on certain things, when somebody would make a comment, I would go to the scriptures, or somebody, scripture would be in the watchtower, go to the scriptures. I would show my wife, like, if you read on, it says ABC, like that doesn't make sense with what this person just said or what that person just said, or the point of the lesson. I was doing things like that. So I was started to plant little seeds in her head, I think. And I'm not the type to be like beat around the bush or be like really quiet and quaint and whatever. Like, how I feel is how I feel, and I'm gonna tell you how I feel. Like, especially after a while, after I get a little bit frustrated, and it's like, this is what it is. I'm tired of beating around. Like, you take it for what it is, and that's what it is. Like, I'm gonna tell you how I feel. And so that's what I was doing when I was I realized that that's probably not the best way to do it, but that was the only way I knew. So I started, I would make, I was like sincerely frustrated. The one thing that used to kill me was those demonstrations during the theocratic ministry school. I used to want to vomit after those things. And I would tell my wife, like, dude, this is laughable. You know what I mean? Like, they're talking, hey, hi, I'm so, like, it would drive me nuts. And I would be telling her, like, like, hey, field service doesn't go like that. We've both been there. It doesn't happen like that. The person doesn't come to the door that way. They're never that receptive. And the person that is talking usually doesn't even have their presentation together that well. Like, and then we go do a few houses, and then we go sit at McDonald's for 2 hours, and then we pretend to go out and do calls. Like, you know what I'm saying? This is not, Jesus didn't do it like that. You know what I mean? And so I was kind of like badgering her, and she would get irritated, and we would kind of argue about it. But then she would have moments where she would kind of pause and look to the side like, dang, that is right, And another thing I always hit her with was like, the tree of, you could tell a tree by its fruitage, right? So another thing that I would talk about was like, just the spirituality of people, whether it was like, we had this group text, and it used to drive me crazy too. Again, it used to drive me crazy from the perspective of a spiritual person, or a person who was looking for some kind of spiritual stimulation. And it would drive me crazy from the perspective of just a black man that, is articulate and intelligent and, you know, but we had this group text, and it was like probably 35 people in this group text, right? And it's supposed to be like a encouraging kind of thing or whatever. But the thing about it was the age range was probably from 15 to early 50s, everywhere from just regular people, you know, regular rank and file witnesses, all the way up to people who were like elders. I kid you not. We never talked about anything besides the NBA and the NFL. That was it. And it went on for years. You know, and I used to have people come by my house, and it was like, you know, these people that carrying the mics, they doing this, that, whatever, and gonna come to my house to talk about the Golden State Warriors. Dude, I don't care. Like, dude, I'm going through so much right now. I know you going through stuff because I hear about it. You know what I'm saying? Like, why are we talking about the Golden State Warriors? Like, I don't care. Like, I care on a Thursday night when it's like, but I don't care. I'm not spending that much of my time, you know what I mean, thinking about that kind of stuff, you know, especially when we're supposed to be waiting on the end of the world. Like, what are we doing? You know, and I would share those experiences with my wife. That was another seed, you know. And around that time, there was two things, I think, for my wife that really gave her a nudge over the waking up side. And they were both had to do with media. So it must have been a couple years or a year or two prior to the time that I'm talking about, between like April and June of 2019. A couple years prior to that, before I had even thought about waking up, Leah Remini had a special on A&E about Scientology. And me and my wife both watched this special, right? And so I didn't say anything. Well, I think we did discuss it, but, you know, I'm eating and I'm in my whole, you know, self-righteous JW mindset. And I'm like, oh, this place is ridiculous. See? Oh, aren't you glad, honey, that we are in the true religion? You know what I mean? But then they started talking about, like, they had like some lifetime contract, you know, that people sign and whatever. And I was like, you know, that kind of sounds like baptism, you know. And then they had like some barracks that they would go to. It was basically like Bethel, you know, but it was like based off the Naval Academy. And I was like, and people were telling their experiences, how they got there and how much time they spent. They basically dedicated their whole lives to living on this base or campus or whatever they called it. I'm like, wow, you know. And so I think something stuck with me then. But the series dragged on, and she got way deeper than I was interested into learning about the Scientologists. So it kind of just fell to the wayside. But, you know, a little bit after we had seen that, we were in the ministry, in service, and a sister, it was me, my wife, you know, an elder and his wife, and then some sister must have mentioned that there was another special about Jehovah's Witnesses that Leah Remini had done on A&E. And the elder hurried up and kind of like shushed it off and whatever. But it must have planted a seed there, because fast forward back to that May 2019 time, I was like, you know what, I'm gonna go back and watch that. And so I did, and I went back and watched it. And I was at work, and it was just constantly weighing on my mind, like, dude, like I just felt like I was coming out of a slumber. Like I just felt like I was having like withdrawal effects or something. Like I just was always tired. My mind was always going. I felt depressed, you know, and I hadn't even left yet, but I just felt like there was a change going on in my mind, you know. And so, but I had watched it, and Fifth was on there, Lloyd Evans was on there. It was so many other stories, and I sent it to my wife. And now, you know, people are already in her ear, warning her and telling her, oh, it's so dangerous that your husband is doing that. He has a beard and all, you know. And we were already kind of having, our disagreements going back and forth about these things. But I was like, look, babe, watch this. I said, these people cannot be lying. Why would they lie about that? And it wasn't like far-fetched. It was things that, even though we hadn't experienced ourselves, we had witnessed other people experience, and can imagine that it easily could go to that point, right? When it came to disfellowshipping, when it came to, people's experiences, and with a lot of people talked about the dreams that they had as children, and how, they had these little traumatic, social, experiences, just coming up with all the different restrictions that Jehovah's Witnesses had, and how it affected them as adults and stuff like that, right? And I was like, these people can't be lying. You know what I mean? Like, again, I will go back to the, the fruitage, tree and its fruit, and I'm like, if this was really from God, people would not be experiencing these kind of residual effects, And then the second thing that happened was that right around the time we were going through this, right in like June, July, something like that, on our local news, and this never has happened before, the whole scandal came up about the child molestation thing about Jehovah's Witnesses. And I promise you, I had never, my wife either, I had never heard of anything like that going on. I didn't know that it was like a thing. I didn't know anything about it. Like, it blew me away, and it blew my wife away. And I think that was what set her off to go down the road that she went. She went down kind of a different path. I think my path was more like intuitive. It had more to do with my personal experiences and people not really living up to what I believed, the point of the scriptures was. When she went down her path, she was on like the Lloyd Evans tip, the, different people from YouTube that were breaking down the Jehovah's Witness theology, the JW Fact stuff, the Australian conference and all that. And she's finding out all this stuff, and she's like, babe, look at this, look at this, look at this. And I was like, cool. Like, oh yeah, that is interesting. You know what I'm saying? Like, but I knew that, that we was gonna be all right, after that. So man, I still continued to go with her. I wouldn't want her to go alone, because, and sometimes I would miss meetings. It was one time though that I missed a meeting, and my wife had came back, and some elder there, and this was a brand new congregation. I didn't know this guy. He didn't know me. He didn't know my kids. He never spoke to me. I never seen him speak to my kids. And my wife was trying to show me this picture that he had wanted to take with my kids, like. And I just thought that was weird. And I really wanted to go slap him in his mouth. Like, don't take a picture. Like, and I was already feeling like the disingenuousness would get under my skin so bad. Like, dude, because I missed the meeting, don't sit there and try to take a picture with my kids like you finna step in and teach them something. Like, you don't know anything. Some dweeb of an elder. That irritated me. I've always been like that when it came to my family, when it came to me as a man, and just whatever. Like, all that little outward appearance of docileness and all that would melt off if you I don't play when it comes to my family. So after that happened, I'm like, I have to continue to go to these meetings, you know what I mean? Because I don't want, them to be able to play up the card like, oh yeah, your husband's not supporting you, or kind of thing like that. So I'm like, that's not happening. So I'm gonna make fun of people. I'm gonna point stuff out. I'm probably gonna go to sleep. I don't care, you know what I'm saying? But I'm here, you know what I mean? And that's what I did, and I had to endure a convention, and an assembly in that time before my wife, I think, was done. So the convention, at the time, I was just, like I said, I was already woke. And one of the things that I used to struggle with so bad when I was a witness was music, right? Because I love hip hop, you know what I'm saying? I love JayZ, I love J. Cole, I love, you know what I mean, some of the more like the 2 Chainz and the Rick Rosses and the JayZ's and all that type of stuff when I'm running, when I'm working out. You can't work out. They would try to make it seem like, you know, like you can work out to Kingdom songs, or, you know, I would try to call and ask elders for music and all type of stuff like that, and it would be just garbage. And I always hated the Kingdom songs. I had somebody talk to me in one of my comments or something, saying that they still have the Kingdom songs stuck in their head. I never memorized any of those songs. I always thought them songs was corny as hell, and I always hated them. I don't know if it's just me being a black guy or loving hip hop or whatever, but I hated those fucking songs. But anyway, but one of my biggest things was like music, right? Because I wanted to work out, you know what I mean? And I like to be physical and stuff like that, but it just died down because there was so many restrictions on just the gym and music, and you got to worry about being in the wrong company, and you got to worry about the music that you listen to, and you can't listen to anything that suggests anything sexual, that might be violent. Even the certain beats that you listen to can stir up certain emotions in you and all that type of stuff like that. And it just like, it was just like, you know. And when I was in there, that was one of the things too. I had gained so much weight. I had got up to a point where I was like, you know, I think I was like 268, almost 270 at my heaviest, you know, when I was there. And it was just like, you know, by the time May 2019 had hit, you know, I was cool. Like, I was like, man, I'm gonna go take care of myself. I'm gonna take care of because when I was the witness, it's like the only thing I had, my whole social life comprised of the Green Bay Packers, LeBron James, and PlayStation, and chicken wings and pizza. That was my whole social life. You know what I mean? Because it was so much restrictions on anything else that you just confine yourself to your personal surroundings. And I think a lot of people inside that organization have depression onset because of just that, because of the fear of being able to socialize and go into different environments. And, you know, you can't get drunk, you can't listen to music, you can't dance, you can't talk to this person, you can't read this, you can't, you know what I mean? And it was just like, you know, and so that was shedding, right? And so one of the other problems that I had when it came to working out was I would always go by myself. I got 3 kids, I got my wife. I would want to take them with me so that they can, you know, be active too, but couldn't go to the YMCA, right? That was the cheapest option for a family, but we couldn't go, you know. And so, and I didn't want to go, you know, even though there was a study back in like 2003 or something like that. Not a study, but I think the New York Times or somebody had written an article about how the YMCA had basically split off from the church and it was no longer affiliated with the church, right? And so even though that was true, a lot of people were still staying away from the YMCA, you know, because they didn't want the social stigma of being a YMCA member inside the congregation. And I didn't either, you know. But when I started waking up, I'm like, I don't care. And I would just kind of like, you know, justify it with my wife and be like, yeah, you know, this is. And then right around the time, I forgot who showed me, but the first day of the convention in June, somebody showed me an article. It was just like some random article, some asterisk that was like, oh yeah, by the way, we still don't go to the YMCA. I'm like, dude, get the heck out of here. Like, I was so angry and irritated. I sat in the car for 3 days. I sat in the car for the whole 3 days of the convention. I would go in to check on my wife and check on the kids, but I was just angry. I'm like, dude, this place is just like, it's like being in prison. You know what I mean? And so, but then, you know, my wife started doing her research and started freeing her up and everything like that. And by the time we went to November, you know, we went to the assembly or whatever. I don't think my wife had all the way kind of made her resolve. I don't know if it was something at the assembly that she heard or whatever. I had to ask her. But I was like, I wasn't gonna let her drive up there by herself, you know, with the kids in the car and stuff like that. So I'm like, all right, we're gonna go to this assembly, but what we're not gonna do is worry about being on time and do all, because it used to be so stressful getting ready for these assemblies and conventions with 3 kids and a wife, and you're trying to get everybody breakfast, and you're yelling at the kids to get ready, and it's supposed to be a spiritual thing. It's supposed to be something that's relaxing. It's not supposed to add stress to you, you know. And so I told her, I'm like, we're not finna worry. We're gonna wake up when we wake up. We're gonna make lunch when we make lunch, and we're gonna get there when we get there. She was like, all right, cool. We got there at like right before lunch, right? And we got there, we walked in, I'm like lying there like, what up? You know what I'm saying? Going in there, I got my beard, you know? And some people haven't seen me in a while, you know what I'm saying? They're like, what's wrong with Brother Smith? I'm like, yeah, I'm done. And so I you know, mosey on in there and everything like that. And, you know, it was right around the baptism talk, and it was like some people that I knew that had kids that was getting baptized. And even that, you know, I was going up to them and stuff. You know how you do before at lunch and stuff. And everybody's like, yeah, you know, my son got baptized. They kids cool with my kids, like, and they're like, yeah, my son got baptized, and they expected me to say something. You know what I mean? And I'm like, word, you know? And they're like, yeah, you know, just one more to go. I got one more kid, you know, we can get baptized. I'm like, man, well, hey, good luck with that. I mean, hey, that's something, right? You know, I didn't know what to say, you know. And I had one guy that was like, you know, this cat was like old. He was like elder. He was like in his he was in his 60s, like old enough to know better. You know what I'm saying? Comes pointing like this, literally like this, in front of a crowd. Like, what's that on your face, brother? I said, it's manhood. Get you some. That's what I was on. No, I didn't say that, but I was thinking it. But I was just nauseated that whole time. And I think even at the end, I just went and sat in the car. I was like watching ESPN videos or something. But then my wife was ready to go, and that was it. Like we never went back to another meeting. And that was in November of 2019. But what I kind of wanted to get around to was the residual effects after that. You know, because like I said, you think that, okay, it's finally over. I'm out. It's all good, right? I can be me. But then your brain asks you, who are you? And then you say, I don't know. And that was the residual effect. You know what I'm saying? That you kind of go through. And that's what I'm going through right now still. You know, that's what my wife is going through. But man, I mean, we had some of the most heated arguments that we ever had, like that first 3 months that we had stopped going to the meetings. You know, and I think it was just the dynamics of me trying to figure out, like, okay, is this a job that I'm supposed to be working at? Like, you know, do I like this? Do I not like this? Did this come from the meeting, or did this come from me as a person? And my wife was going through the same thing, you know. And it's like immediately everything in your life comes to the front of the congregation, so to speak. And it's like, what's yours and what's not, you know. And you trying to, and for me especially, like, I was so disgusted with it. I just wanted to get rid of anything that I felt like came from that organization, you know, my job, and, you know, and I'm still in the process of doing that, trying to find myself, you know, work-wise. Like, and then you just, there's already a lot of pressure being a father and being a husband and being young and not having a lot of guidance, a lot of help, you know. And then on top of that, it's just like, you know, you're trying to figure out, like, where to go next. You know, you've left this religion, you know, it affects your work performance because it's on your mind and stuff like that. You can't explain it to anybody at work. Like, what do you mean you left your religion? Like, what? So what? You know what I mean? They don't understand, you know. And so you're trying to deal with that and go out into the world, and then there's like, I started to like think about like what could have been, You know what I mean? Like I said, since I was a kid, I was a witness. So like, would I have gone to school for this, or would I have pursued this career? It takes you down a dark rabbit hole. Sometimes you get depressed, you know, and I know my wife was going through the same things, you know, and it's like there's no therapy for that, you know, specifically, you know, and it's just like you trying to figure it out. And I think that's what the arguments were. It was just both of us getting all of that, you know, out of our system. But coming back around to the marriage thing, I think one of the other reasons that I felt more, something I kind of felt like was a victory, was the fact that my wife and I weren't like a JW couple. Like, my marriage and my relationship with my wife, I felt like was mine. You know what I mean? Because I didn't meet her in the organization. In fact, you know, the organization, you know, tried very hard to stop me from marrying her, even though when we met, neither one of us was baptized. Like I said, neither one of us had parents that were going to meetings. No, neither one of us was baptized. You know what I mean? I just happened to meet her at the club, you know, at the congregation I was going to. My mom was in a different state. My dad was never a witness, you know, but I was just a teenager, you know what I'm saying, that was going to the meetings by myself, trying to do right and trying to learn about God and whatever. You know, when I went, I still had my earrings in, I still had my goatee. I was being myself, you know what I mean? But, you know, and then my wife is this beautiful girl, you know, that, you know, also didn't have her family in, her mother and father in, but she had a cousin who was like, you know, part of one of those cliques. She was like a whatever, but, you know, one of those really regimented, hardcore, you know, JWs, and she would be trying to, you know, tell my wife that she couldn't marry me, or she couldn't talk to me because she was further along in the Bible teach book than I was. I tried to invite my wife to a Bible reading that I had, and then her cousin went and told her, like, oh, I'm sorry, Morgan's lying to you. You know, he doesn't really go to nobody. I went to his congregation, you know, nobody even knows who he is, you know. And I'm like, why would I invite you somewhere and tell you a date and a time to be there, and nobody knows me and I don't have a Bible reading? Like, what are you talking about? You know? And so that was debunked, you know, and, you know, my wife came and Bible reading, and that congregation, everybody knew me, because I had been going there since I was 15. I was the only teenager that would come to the meeting by myself. You know what I mean? Like, that didn't have a family that was all tied into an organization, you know? And, you know, and then they, you know, tried to hook her up with some scrub. I don't even know if he goes to the meeting anymore, but some little soft little scrub, born in kind of guy. That didn't work out. So, but you know, we made it through all of that, you know, and we had a worldly relationship, you know what I mean, when we was together, a worldly relationship. Like, we did all the shit that regular people do when they're in a relationship, you know. And so, you know, we didn't use the hall when we got married or anything like that. We went to the courthouse, and so that was kind of a little bit of a victory, I feel like. But yeah, and like I said, even talking to people that have been through this and have been out for 10 years and decades, you know, and still dealing with that, you know. It's not easy. Every day, you know, you're kind of trying to redefine yourself and re-understand, you know, who you are and what you're about, you know. The other thing is books. You know, I think from the time I was 15 to the time I was 31, like, I didn't read one book. Everything that I read came from the organization. Like, I discovered in the last 9 months that I like to read. 9 months, I read like 25 books. You know, I got, you know, a little Kindle. I've read some, you know, some paperbacks, some hardcovers, and, you know, I never knew that about myself. You know, so it's little victories like that, you know, that keep it going. And that's what, you know, I'm all right with that. You know, as long as I continue to grow, as long as I continue to, you know, learn from this. And again, you know, I was saying one of my favorite rappers is JayZ. He'd always say, a loss ain't a loss, it's a lesson. You know what I mean? And so I take comfort in that. For me being a part of this cult, I can see cultish tendencies in a lot of stuff, and that can prevent me from, you know, going down a similar road in the future. And it can help me to prevent other people from going down that road at all, you know, if they listen, you know. And that's something that anybody that's been a Jehovah's Witness, that has done their research and done their work when it comes to freeing themselves mentally from this organization, it's something that any of us can stand on, is that, you know, we have that experience now to draw from. And that individuality, you know, the you know, that God in you, you know, that's something that I have a greater affinity for than I probably ever would have had, because it was kept from me for so long, you know. You constantly told how to look and how to be, how to talk, you know. I was listening to this interview one time from the Breakfast Club. This guy, I think his name was Frank something. I don't remember what his last name was, but he was from Islam. You know, he was from like the fruit of Islam. And he was talking about the difference between unity and uniformity, you know. And I thought it was a great point, because he talked about how uniformity was like a mock version of unity, right? So everybody puts on the same appearance physically. You know, they look like they're moving in the same direction. They look like, you know, they're dressed the same, and they look the same, and they sound the same, but they're all mentally, they're going in different directions. And I feel like that's what was going on in the organization. But real unity is when everybody can be themselves, right? So everybody, that's the flavor of life. That's the essence of life, is differences, right? You know, if every food tasted the same, if every drink tasted the same, if every card looked the same, you know what I'm saying, life would be a lot more depressing. It's the same thing, you know, going back to the scriptures, you know, when Paul talked about the body. Like, if the body, if everything was one thing, it would just be basically like an organism or something. You know what I mean? But when those cells all break up and divide into different things and become fingers and toes and ears and hair and all that type of stuff like that, then you get a body, and then you can experience life. Then you can taste things, and you can see things, and you can hear things, and you can dance, and you can jump, and you can sing. You know, that's what life is about, you know. And I have a greater appreciation for that now, you know, than ever, you know. And so it's going to continue to be, you know, a journey. I'm going to continue to try to, you know, post things on here, and, you know, wherever I can be of encouragement, wherever I can be of assistance, you know, I'm going to try to do that. Not just on YouTube, but I do that in my daily life, you know. I'm going to continue to search for God. Not necessarily, that's a whole nother video, but my whole concept of the term God has changed. We'll say that. You know what I mean? But I feel like it's in me. I feel like it's in you. I feel like that's what life is. It's God. You know what I mean? And I look forward to continuing to figure that stuff out by reading and experiencing and having conversations. And I hope everybody out there that's an XJW will get to experience the same thing. So that's it. That's all I got for this video. Very short video. No, I'm just playing. But if anybody has any suggestions, questions on, you know, any subjects, you know, that, you know, you would like to hear about, I love the feedback, comments, and if they keep up, I'll keep making videos. You know what I mean? So that's it. So peace and love to everybody, and stay woke.